Imagine standing at the steps of a grand, neoclassical building. Its impressive dome reaches toward the sky, intricate stonework adorns its facade, and massive columns support its entrance. Now imagine discovering that according to conventional history, this building shouldn't exist. Picture this. Across North America, Europe, and Asia, thousands of breathtaking structures share similar architectural features. Ornate details, impossible construction methods, and technologies that seem beyond their time period. Yet our history books remain mysteriously silent about their origins. You're about to discover why countless people believe these buildings are evidence of something our textbooks never taught us. A vast, technologically advanced civilization that once spanned continents, possessed knowledge we're only now rediscovering, and then vanished almost completely from our historical record. This is Tartaria, a civilization so expansive it reportedly covered 1/3 of the world's landmass. A culture potentially more advanced than our own that somehow disappeared, leaving behind only its magnificent buildings as silent witnesses to its existence. The standard historical narrative says Tartaria was simply a vague geographical region, nothing more. But tonight, we'll examine the growing evidence suggesting it may have been something far more significant, a highly sophisticated global empire deliberately erased from our collective memory. Why would such knowledge be suppressed? Who would benefit from hiding the truth about our past? These questions have fueled one of the internet's most persistent alternative history theories, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about human civilization. As you settle in, prepare to journey through architectural anomalies that defy conventional explanation. We'll explore technologies that shouldn't have existed, maps that show what was officially undiscovered, and historical accounts that contradict the timeline we've been taught. We'll examine old photographs showing impossibly advanced features in 19th century cities. We'll analyze the curious case of orphan buildings, structures so grand and complex they seem to have appeared without explanation, their creators and purposes lost to time. Tonight, we enter the world of mud floods, reset theories, and stolen history. We'll separate fact from fiction, evidence from speculation, and critically examine whether the Tartaria theory reveals genuine historical blind spots or simply represents wishful thinking about a forgotten golden age. The buildings around us might be whispering secrets about our past. Technologies we consider modern innovations might be rediscoveries of lost knowledge. And the timeline of human advancement might be far more complex than we've been led to believe. What if everything you know about history is incomplete? What if an advanced civilization once thrived across continents before being systematically removed from our textbooks? What if the evidence has been hiding in plain sight all along, in the very architecture that surrounds us? Tonight, we'll explore what happened to this alleged lost empire and why the clues simply don't add up. We'll examine why millions are questioning the official narrative and what these alternative theories tell us about both our past and our present. The truth about Tartaria may challenge your understanding of human history. It may reveal uncomfortable questions about how knowledge is controlled and why certain narratives become accepted while others are suppressed. Or it may simply represent humanity's eternal search for lost golden ages. Either way, the mystery deserves our attention. Because whether Tartaria was real or imagined, the questions it raises about our past remain unanswered. And in those unanswered questions lies the possibility that we've been missing something crucial about who we are and where we came from. So join me as we examine the evidence, separate fact from fantasy, and determine whether Tartaria represents the greatest cover-up in human history or simply our collective longing for a more meaningful past. The buildings are waiting. The maps are ready to be reinterpreted. The lost history is calling. Tonight, we walk through the forgotten doorways of our past and ask, what if Tartaria was real? What if our entire understanding of human civilization is built on an incomplete foundation? And most importantly, what would it mean if we've been living in the shadow of a lost, advanced world all along? The buildings stand as silent witnesses. The anomalies in our historical record persist. And the growing community of researchers dedicated to uncovering the truth continues to find evidence that challenges our conventional understanding of the past. Tonight, we join their quest. As we begin this journey, remember that the purpose isn't merely to entertain conspiracy theories, but to critically examine the gaps in our historical knowledge, the unexplained technologies, the architectural marvels, the curious omissions in our textbooks, and ask whether they point to something more. Whether you fall asleep tonight believing in a hidden chapter of human history or confident in conventional explanations, the questions we raise will linger. Because at its core, the Tartaria mystery isn't just about a forgotten empire. It's about how we know what we know and whether we're seeing the complete picture. So settle in as we embark on this exploration of our contested past. The story of Tartaria, real or imagined, awaits us. And by the end, you may never look at our world quite the same way again. Chapter 2. The Forbidden History. What if everything we've been taught about human civilization is fundamentally incomplete? Not just missing a few details, but lacking entire chapters, perhaps the most important ones. This is the core question that the Tartaria theory forces us to confront. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Tartaria existed as the alternative historians suggest, as an advanced, global civilization that was deliberately erased from our records, it would require rewriting virtually every history book in existence. It would transform our understanding of human potential and technological development. Consider what it would mean for our understanding of progress. We've been taught that humanity has moved along a relatively linear path from primitive to advanced. But what if we've actually been recovering lost knowledge rather than discovering new innovations? The implications extend beyond mere historical curiosity. If an advanced civilization was systematically erased from our collective memory, we must ask who would benefit from such a deception and whether similar manipulations of knowledge continue to shape our world today. This is why the Tartaria question matters. Not because it's an entertaining alternative history, but because it challenges us to examine how knowledge is created, controlled, and sometimes suppressed. It asks us to consider whether we're seeing the full picture of human potential. For those hearing about Tartaria for the first time, the claim might seem outlandish. How could an entire civilization be forgotten? Yet history is written by the victors, and the systematic destruction of knowledge has precedent throughout human history. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, the Spanish destruction of Aztec codices, book burnings across various regimes. History shows that knowledge can be lost, suppressed, or deliberately destroyed when it conflicts with the narrative preferred by those in power. What makes Tartaria different is the scale. We're not talking about isolated incidents of knowledge suppression, but potentially the greatest historical cover-up ever undertaken. A deliberate rewriting of history to obscure the existence of a vast, advanced empire. The architectural evidence alone is compelling enough to warrant investigation. Across North America, Europe, and Asia stand buildings of such complexity and grandeur that their construction would challenge modern engineers, yet they supposedly appeared during less technologically advanced eras. Consider the impossible timelines. How did America's Gilded Age produce such an explosion of ornate architecture immediately after the Civil War? How were magnificent structures built in frontier towns before reliable transportation networks existed to deliver materials? Then there are the orphan buildings, structures that appear in old photographs fully formed, with no construction documentation, their builders unknown, their purposes unclear. They stand as anomalies in our historical record, challenging conventional explanations. The technology question compounds the mystery. Old photographs show atmospheric energy systems, elaborate infrastructure, and transportation networks that seem beyond the capabilities of their supposed era. Were these innovations or rediscoveries of Tartarian knowledge? World's fairs present another puzzle. Why were such elaborate, temporary structures built at massive expense, only to be destroyed after brief exhibitions? Were they actually Tartarian buildings, repurposed for expositions before being demolished to hide their origins? The mud flood theory suggests many of these buildings weren't built in the 19th century at all. Rather, they were buried in a cataclysmic event, with their first floors becoming basements as new societies built around and above them, unaware of their true history. If true, our entire chronology of architectural and technological development would need revision. The skills we thought were acquired gradually over centuries might actually represent recovered knowledge from a more advanced past civilization. Then there's the map evidence. Historical maps show Tartaria as a vast empire spanning much of Asia and parts of Europe. While conventional historians dismiss this as imprecise geography, alternative researchers point to the detailed documentation of Tartarian cities, culture, and governance. The symbolic evidence is equally compelling. Across supposedly unconnected cultures, similar architectural styles and motifs appear: double-headed eagles, ornate domes, specific proportions, and designs that suggest a unified global aesthetic rather than isolated developments. Why would buildings in Moscow, Paris, and San Francisco share such specific architectural features if they weren't connected by a common civilization? The standard explanation of architectural influence seems insufficient to explain such worldwide uniformity. The technological mysteries deepen when we examine the construction methods. Modern engineers remain puzzled by how certain historic buildings were created without advanced equipment. The precision cutting of massive stones, the transportation of heavy materials, the complex geometries all challenge conventional narratives. Weather manipulation, free energy systems, advanced transportation networks all appear in historical photographs and documents, then mysteriously disappear from both use and memory. Did we forget technologies we once possessed? Or were they Tartarian innovations lost in a historical reset? The reset theory suggests that around the early 1800s, something catastrophic happened. Whether natural disaster or deliberate action, this event buried much of the existing Tartarian civilization. The survivors rebuilt, but without the knowledge or technologies of their predecessors. Those who controlled the aftermath controlled the narrative. New power structures emerged, claiming credit for the surviving architecture, rewriting history books, and establishing the version of history we now accept as fact, one that erases Tartaria entirely. If this sounds like conspiracy thinking, consider how much of accepted history has been revised as new evidence emerged. From our understanding of ancient civilizations to the contributions of marginalized groups, history is constantly being rewritten as we uncover previously hidden truths. The Tartaria theory doesn't require belief in supernatural forces or alien intervention. It simply suggests that human civilization has followed a more complex path than we've been taught, with advances and setbacks, lost knowledge, and recovered innovations. Whether you find the theory compelling or questionable, the evidence demands examination. The architectural anomalies, technological mysteries, and historical inconsistencies represent genuine puzzles that conventional history struggles to explain satisfactorily. As we proceed, we'll examine both the evidence supporting the Tartaria theory and the conventional explanations offered to counter it. Our goal isn't to convince, but to explore, to consider possibilities beyond the accepted narrative and examine the gaps in our historical knowledge. By the end, you may not believe in a vast, erased civilization, but you will almost certainly question aspects of our accepted history that don't quite add up. And in that questioning lies the true value of the Tartaria investigation. For if nothing else, the theory reminds us that history is not a settled science, but an ongoing investigation, that accepted narratives should be questioned, and that the truth about our past may be far more remarkable than we've been led to believe. Chapter 3: The Empire That Never Was. The story of Tartaria begins with maps, old, yellow documents that show a massive empire spanning much of Eurasia. Detailed cartography from the 16th to 19th centuries consistently labels a vast territory as Tartaria or Grand Tartary, stretching from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean. Conventional historians dismiss these maps as reflecting European ignorance about Central Asia. They argue that Tartaria was simply a vague geographical designation for lands occupied by various nomadic peoples, not a unified empire or advanced civilization. But the alternative history community points to the remarkable detail in these maps. They show specific Tartarian cities, trade routes, and cultural boundaries. They distinguish between Chinese Tartary, independent Tartary, and Russian Tartary, suggesting a nuanced understanding rather than ignorance. The very name, Tartaria, has contested origins. Some link it to Tatars, various Turkic peoples of the Eurasian steppe. Others connect it to the Greek Tartarus, the underworld, suggesting ancient awareness of a civilization with access to inner earth or advanced underground technologies. Historical texts from the period describe Tartarians as a distinct people with their own customs, language, and governance structures. Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, and other travelers wrote about encounters with Tartarian peoples, describing advanced cities and sophisticated cultural practices. Encyclopedia Britannica editions from the 18th and early 19th centuries contain detailed entries about Tartaria as a significant empire. Later editions gradually reduced these references until Tartaria became merely a footnote, a curious example of knowledge not evolving but disappearing. The conventional narrative places Tartaria within the context of the Mongol Empire and its successors. Historians argue that what alternative researchers call Tartaria was simply the Western term for territories under Mongol control, later fragmented into various khanates. But this explanation fails to address why Tartaria appears on maps long after the Mongol Empire's dissolution. It also doesn't explain why Tartaria is often shown as distinct from Mongol territories, with different boundaries and characteristics. The timeline presents another puzzle. Maps show Tartaria as a major power well into the 19th century, yet conventional history suggests the region had been absorbed into the Russian and Chinese empires long before then. This discrepancy fuels theories of deliberate historical revision. If Tartaria was merely a geographical region, why was it depicted with its own flag, coat of arms, and distinct cultural symbols? Heraldic records show the Tartarian double-headed eagle, a symbol later adopted by various European powers, including Russia and the Habsburg Empire. The linguistic evidence adds another layer of mystery. Documents describe a unique Tartarian language, yet linguists now claim no such distinct language existed. Were these references to Turkic languages or evidence of a lost Tartarian tongue systematically erased from records? The architectural record provides perhaps the most compelling evidence for Tartaria's existence. Across the supposed Tartarian territories and beyond, stand buildings sharing specific stylistic elements: grand domes, elaborate star forts, intricate ornamentation, and precise mathematical proportions. These architectural similarities extend far beyond what might be expected from mere cultural exchange. Buildings in Moscow, Beijing, Paris, and even American cities share specific design elements that suggest a unified aesthetic, potentially the remnants of a once global Tartarian influence. Star forts present a particular mystery. These elaborate defensive structures, with their mathematically precise geometric patterns, appear across continents. Conventional history attributes them to Renaissance military architecture, but alternative researchers see evidence of a unified global design system. The timing of Tartaria's disappearance from maps and historical records coincides with several significant world events. The Napoleonic Wars, the mysterious Year Without a Summer in 1816, and major political reorganizations all occurred as Tartaria was being erased from our collective knowledge. This period also saw the rise of the Romantic nationalist movements, which emphasized distinct national identities rather than cross-cultural connections. Was this shift in consciousness organic, or part of a deliberate campaign to fragment the memory of a once unified global culture? The 19th century brought unprecedented changes to historical narratives worldwide. Colonial powers rewrote indigenous histories, archaeological discoveries were fitted into new chronologies, and the modern concept of distinct, competing nation-states solidified. Tartaria had no place in this new world order. Alternative researchers suggest a catastrophic event, the mud flood, buried much of Tartaria's physical evidence. They point to buildings worldwide with first floors now serving as basements, windows below street level, and other architectural anomalies suggesting a significant rise in ground levels. Conventional explanations for these features include practical urban development decisions, raising street levels to improve drainage, combat flooding, or accommodate new infrastructure. Yet the global prevalence of these buried first floors remains difficult to explain as coincidental local adjustments. The technology question further complicates the timeline. Historical photographs show devices resembling electrical systems before electricity was supposedly widespread. They show atmospheric energy collectors, elaborate lighting systems, and transportation technologies that appear anachronistic for their era. Were these early prototypes of technologies independently developed during the Industrial Revolution? Or evidence of Tartarian knowledge, perhaps related to Nikola Tesla's later work on wireless energy, that was gradually lost or suppressed as petroleum-based energy systems gained dominance? Tesla himself represents an interesting connection to the Tartaria theory. Born in territory historically associated with Tartaria, His work on wireless energy transmission and atmospheric electricity echoed technologies that alternative researchers identify in old Tartarian buildings and infrastructure. His well-documented conflicts with industrialists like Edison and Morgan and the suppression of his later work mirror the proposed pattern of Tartarian knowledge being systematically removed from public access as new power structures consolidated control over technological development. The architectural and technological evidence extends to North America, where the theory faces its greatest challenge from conventional history. How could Tartarian influence reach a continent supposedly discovered long after Tartaria's establishment? The answer, alternative researchers suggest, lies in questioning the conventional chronology of North American settlement itself. They point to maps showing California as an island, advanced civilizations in the American interior, and other anomalies suggesting pre-Columbian contact with Eurasian cultures. The stunning architecture of America's Gilded Age, appearing almost overnight in the decades after the Civil War, presents another anomaly. How did a nation rebuilding after a devastating conflict suddenly acquire the resources, expertise, and aesthetic sophistication to create such magnificent structures? Were these actually existing Tartarian buildings, repurposed and attributed to American architects? Were they built using recovered Tartarian knowledge? Or does their rapid appearance reflect legitimate but underappreciated American architectural genius during a period of unprecedented prosperity? Chapter 4. Hidden in Plain Sight. The most compelling evidence for Tartaria's existence isn't buried in remote locations or hidden in classified archives. It stands in plain sight in cities worldwide. The elaborate neoclassical, Baroque, and Gothic structures that conventional history attributes to the 18th and 19th centuries. These buildings share distinctive features that suggest a unified design philosophy and construction methodology: ornate domes, precise geometric proportions, advanced acoustic properties, and integration with atmospheric energy systems. Their global consistency challenges the narrative of independent development. Consider the curious case of orphan buildings, structures that appear in historical photographs fully formed, with no construction documentation. City halls, post offices, courthouses, and other administrative buildings seemingly materialized overnight across North America during the late 19th century. Conventional history attributes this architectural explosion to the economic boom of the Industrial Revolution. But alternative researchers question whether a young nation recovering from civil war could produce such architectural masterpieces so quickly and on such a massive scale. The buildings themselves contain numerous anomalies. Many feature bizarre proportions, with extraordinarily high ceilings, oversized doors, and massive components that seem designed for beings larger than average humans. Were these aesthetic choices or evidence of a different population? Then there's the technology integrated into these structures: complex ventilation systems, atmospheric energy collectors often misidentified as decorative elements, and acoustic properties that allow whispers to be heard across vast interior spaces. These features suggest advanced scientific understanding. The construction methods present further mysteries. Modern engineers acknowledge that many of these buildings would be challenging to construct even with today's technology. The precise cutting of massive stones, the transportation of heavy materials, and the complex joining techniques all defy easy explanation. Look at any historical photograph of construction during this period, and you'll notice a puzzling lack of appropriate machinery. How were massive stone blocks lifted, transported, and placed with such precision using only the simple tools visible in these images? The building's purposes raise additional questions. Why were such elaborate structures built for mundane administrative functions? Why did small frontier towns often possess architectural masterpieces that would seem excessive even in major metropolitan centers? The World's Fairs phenomenon compounds these mysteries. These elaborate exhibitions, featuring thousands of advanced buildings, were supposedly constructed in months, displayed briefly, then almost all deliberately destroyed. The explanation of temporary structures seems inadequate given their scale and quality. The 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, for example, created an entire neoclassical city of stunning white buildings, the White City, only to demolish it shortly afterward. Photographs show structures of such grandeur and technical sophistication that their temporary nature defies logical explanation. Were these actually existing Tartarian buildings, repurposed for the exhibitions, and then destroyed to eliminate evidence of their true origins? The deliberate destruction of such architectural treasures makes little sense from economic or cultural perspectives. Old photographs reveal another anomaly: the conspicuous absence of construction sites for major buildings. We have countless images of completed structures, but surprisingly few showing their construction in progress. This documentary gap fuels theories that these buildings predated their official histories. The mudflood theory attempts to explain these architectural mysteries. It suggests a catastrophic event, whether natural disaster, deliberate engineering, or atmospheric phenomenon, buried the first floors of existing Tartarian buildings across vast regions. Evidence for this theory includes the ubiquitous, buried, first floors visible in older buildings worldwide. Windows below street level, doors opening into dirt, grand entrances now serving as basement access. These features appear consistently across continents and architectural styles. Conventional explanations attribute these features to practical urban development, raising street levels for sewage systems, flood control, or transportation infrastructure. But the global consistency of these buried levels suggests a more widespread phenomenon than isolated civic projects. The placement of many of these buildings presents another puzzle. They often align with precise geometric patterns when viewed from above, creating energy grids within city layouts. These patterns appear in cities worldwide, suggesting unified planning rather than organic development. The building's integration with atmospheric electrical systems is particularly telling. Many feature copper domes, metal roofs, and elaborate spires that researchers suggest functioned as energy collection and distribution systems similar to those Tesla would later develop. Historical photographs show curious devices atop many buildings. Metal structures often dismissed as decorative finials that bear striking resemblance to atmospheric energy collectors. Were these merely ornamental or evidence of advanced Tartarian technology? The most compelling evidence comes from old photographs showing cities illuminated at night before widespread electrical distribution. The 1880s World's Fairs featured brilliant lighting displays decades before such technology was supposedly available to the general public. Historians attribute these displays to early electrical experimentation, but alternative researchers point to the absence of visible power lines or generating stations that would be necessary for conventional electrical systems. Was this Tartarian wireless energy technology in operation? The timing of Tartaria's supposed erasure from history coincides with the rise of petroleum-based energy systems and the suppression of wireless energy research. Did industrial interests deliberately eliminate competing technologies as they consolidated control over the new energy economy? The architectural evidence extends to non-public buildings as well. Across continents, ordinary residences from certain periods share specific design elements, materials, and proportions that suggest standardized construction methods far beyond what conventional history attributes to the era. These residential patterns appear in regions supposedly having minimal cultural contact during the period. The same distinctive designs appear simultaneously in Eastern Europe, Asia, and North America, challenging the narrative of independent architectural evolution. Old maps reveal another layer of evidence: entire city layouts that appear fully planned rather than organically developed. The precise geometric arrangements, orientation to astronomical features, and integration of advanced infrastructure suggest sophisticated urban planning beyond their supposed era. These planned cities often feature distinctive star fort designs, with mathematically precise geometric layouts that serve both defensive and energetic functions. These same patterns appear across continents, suggesting a unified global design system rather than independent military innovations. The decay of architectural knowledge following this period is particularly telling. Modern attempts to replicate the craftsmanship of these orphan buildings often fall short. Skills that were supposedly common in the 19th century seem to have mysteriously disappeared by the 20th. This architectural amnesia extends beyond aesthetic elements to functional knowledge. The acoustic properties, natural temperature regulation systems, and durability of older buildings often surpass their modern counterparts. Have we lost knowledge once possessed by earlier builders? The photographic record itself contains anomalies. Early photographs often show cities with these elaborate structures already fully built, yet with sparse populations. Empty streets, minimal traffic, and few signs of the massive workforce needed to maintain such elaborate urban environments. Were these photographs captured during a reoccupation phase, as new populations moved into existing Tartarian cities? Do they document a period when survivors were reclaiming built environments after some catastrophic population reduction event? The alternative timeline suggests that what we call the Industrial Revolution might actually represent a recovery period, rediscovering and repurposing technologies that existed before a global catastrophe. This would explain the seemingly impossible pace of innovation during this era. If this alternative history is accurate, we're faced with a profound question. How could knowledge of an advanced global civilization be so thoroughly removed from our collective memory in just a few generations? The answer may lie in the deliberate rewriting of history that followed. Educational systems established in the late 19th century standardized historical narratives across Western nations. The newly created public schools taught uniform versions of history that emphasized national identities and linear progress while eliminating competing narratives. Control of information became increasingly centralized through this period. Libraries were reorganized, archives consolidated, and historical documents categorized according to new systems. This reorganization created opportunities for selective preservation and strategic removal of contradictory evidence. The architectural and technological evidence we've examined represents just the first layer of the Tartaria mystery. As we continue our investigation, we'll explore how an entire civilization might have been erased from our historical record, and why this matters for our understanding of human potential. The buildings stand as silent witnesses, their stones holding secrets about their true origins. The technologies integrated into their designs suggest knowledge we're only beginning to rediscover. And the global patterns connecting these structures hint at a unified civilization that conventional history denies existed. What awaits us in the deeper layers of this mystery? What will we find as we examine the historical record gaps, the technological anomalies, and the persistent legends of an advanced civilization lost to time? The evidence we've uncovered so far suggests we've only glimpsed the edge of a much larger hidden history. As we proceed, remember that these magnificent structures weren't hidden in remote locations. They stand in our major cities, their features visible to anyone willing to look beyond conventional explanations. The greatest evidence for Tartaria has always been hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to recognize its significance. Chapter 5: The Vanishing Knowledge. As we delve deeper into the Tartaria mystery, the contradictions in our established historical narrative become increasingly apparent. These aren't minor discrepancies easily dismissed as record-keeping errors. They represent fundamental inconsistencies in our understanding of technological development, architectural achievements, and cultural evolution. Consider the official timeline of electrical development. Conventional history tells us that practical electrical applications began in the late 19th century, with limited public implementation until the early 20th century. Yet historical photographs from the 1850s onward show cities brilliantly illuminated at night. These images reveal streetscapes bathed in light, public spaces with consistent illumination, and buildings glowing from within, all before Thomas Edison's practical incandescent bulb in 1879 and well before widespread electrical distribution. How were these urban environments so thoroughly illuminated? Gas lighting is the conventional explanation, but gas lamps produce a distinctive, uneven light signature easily distinguished from the more uniform brightness visible in these photographs. The quality of illumination appears remarkably similar to modern electrical lighting. Even more puzzling are the aerial photographs from the late 19th century showing illuminated city grids with no visible power generation facilities. Modern electrical systems require substantial infrastructure, power plants, transmission lines, substations. Yet these appear absent from the historical record. Wireless energy transmission provides one possible explanation. Nikola Tesla demonstrated such technology in the late 19th century, but conventional history maintains it was never implemented at scale. Yet the photographic evidence suggests widespread deployment of some form of wireless power system. The architectural contradictions are equally troubling. Official histories attribute most grand civic buildings in North America to the post-Civil War period. Yet this presents a significant problem. How did a nation devastated by war suddenly acquire the resources and expertise for such architectural wonders? The speed of construction defies conventional explanation. Cities like Chicago and San Francisco reportedly rebuilt completely within just a few years after devastating fires. Modern construction projects of similar scale require decades, even with advanced technology and abundant resources. Then there's the craftsmanship question. These buildings feature intricate stonework, massive domed roofs, and engineering precision that would challenge modern builders. Yet they were supposedly created in an era with limited mechanization and before computer-aided design. The documentary record shows another anomaly. The construction photographs don't match the finished buildings. Images purporting to show these structures being built often feature different foundations, alternative designs, or construction methods inconsistent with the final results. When construction photographs do exist, they frequently show buildings in advanced stages of completion with minimal equipment present. Where are the massive cranes, heavy machinery, and extensive scaffolding that would be necessary for such monumental construction projects? The historical context presents further contradictions. America in the 1870s to 1890s experienced severe economic depressions, yet this same period supposedly produced the greatest building boom in the nation's history. Where did the capital for these massive projects originate during economic downturns? The question of skilled labor presents another paradox. These architectural masterpieces required master craftsmen by the thousands, yet the historical record shows limited immigration of such artisans and few established training programs sufficient to produce the required workforce. The buildings themselves contain technological features that contradict their supposed timeline. Complex ventilation systems, sophisticated acoustic design, electromagnetic properties, and thermal regulation mechanisms all suggest knowledge that wasn't supposedly available to 19th century builders. Many structures incorporate materials and construction techniques that remain difficult to replicate today. The precision cutting of massive stone blocks, the transportation of these materials to construction sites, and their placement with extraordinary accuracy all challenge conventional historical explanations. The geographical distribution of these architectural marvels creates another contradiction. Remote frontier towns often feature disproportionately grand civic buildings, opera houses, post offices, courthouses that seem economically unjustifiable for their population and commercial importance. Why would small settlements with limited resources invest so heavily in architectural extravagance? The conventional explanation of civic pride and competitive city building seems insufficient when considering the sheer scale and sophistication of these structures relative to their locations. The chronological contradictions extend beyond architecture to technology. Historical accounts describe technologies that vanished rather than evolved. Sophisticated hydraulic systems, pneumatic networks, and atmospheric energy devices appear in 19th century documentation, then disappear completely. This pattern contradicts the normal progression of technological development. Useful technologies typically evolve through incremental improvements rather than vanishing entirely. The disappearance of entire technological systems suggests a disruption in knowledge transmission inconsistent with organic development. The demographic contradictions are equally puzzling. Cities with elaborate infrastructure built for large populations show surprisingly few inhabitants in early photographs. Streets designed for heavy traffic appear nearly empty. Grand public spaces seem underutilized relative to their scale. Were these cities built in anticipation of population growth that hadn't yet occurred? Or do they represent urban environments that once housed larger populations before some catastrophic depopulation event, the same event that potentially buried the first floors of existing buildings? The historical record itself contains striking anomalies. Compare encyclopedia entries about Tartaria from different periods. Earlier editions contain detailed information about Tartarian governance, culture, and geography. Later editions progressively reduce this information until Tartaria disappears entirely. This pattern of vanishing knowledge repeats across multiple references. Maps, academic texts, and official documents show Tartaria gradually being erased rather than our understanding of it evolving through better information, the opposite of the normal pattern of historical discovery. Institutional records present their own contradictions. Many grand buildings lack comprehensive construction documentation. Architectural drawings appear to be created after completion rather than as planning documents. Funding sources remain obscure despite the enormous capital required. The establishment of the Smithsonian Institution coincides suspiciously with this period of historical revision. Founded in 1846, the institution quickly became the authority on American archaeological findings, with the power to determine which discoveries entered the official historical record. Reports from early American archaeological excavations describe findings that contradict the established historical narrative. Evidence of advanced civilizations, technologies inconsistent with indigenous development timelines, and artifacts suggesting contact with Eurasian cultures. Many of these findings disappeared into Smithsonian storage. The Great Museum fires of the 19th century represent another troubling pattern. Major fires destroyed museums, libraries, and archives precisely when they contained materials that might have documented alternative historical narratives. These accidental destructions conveniently eliminated contradictory evidence. The 1871 Great Chicago Fire, 1906 San Francisco earthquake and fire, and similar catastrophes didn't just destroy cities. They eliminated original land titles, property records, and documentation that might have revealed the true origins and ownership of these grand architectural structures. The photographic record itself contains anomalies. Early photographs often show these elaborate structures already fully built, yet with sparse populations. Empty streets, minimal traffic, and few signs of the massive workforce needed to maintain such elaborate urban environments. Historical portraits from this period show individuals with distinctive physiological features, unusual height, distinctive cranial structures, and other characteristics that suggest a potentially different population than modern humans. Were these artistic conventions or documentation of a different human strain? The educational system established in the late 19th century standardized historical narratives worldwide with remarkable coordination. Public education suddenly emphasized identical historical timelines across Western nations, while alternative perspectives were systematically removed from curricula. The Tartaria theory provides a framework that resolves many of these contradictions. If these buildings were constructed by an earlier, more advanced civilization, one subsequently buried by catastrophe and erased from historical records, the anomalies in our conventional narrative become explicable. Rather than requiring us to believe in impossible construction timelines, inexplicable technological regressions, and architectural knowledge that appeared and disappeared mysteriously, the alternative timeline suggests a different sequence: advanced civilization, catastrophic reset, recovery and reoccupation, and historical revision. As we examine these contradictions, we're not simply entertaining an alternative history. We're confronting fundamental problems in our conventional narrative that demand explanation. Whether or not Tartaria existed exactly as alternative researchers suggest, these anomalies require us to reconsider our understanding of the past. Chapter 6. Echoes from the Forgotten World. Throughout human history, myths and legends have often contained fragments of forgotten truths. Stories dismissed as mere folklore frequently preserve memories of real events, encoded in symbolic language that protects knowledge through generations. The Tartaria narrative intersects with numerous such myths from cultures worldwide. The most prevalent is the concept of a golden age, a period of advanced knowledge, harmonious society, and technological sophistication that preceded our current civilization. From the Greek myth of Atlantis to the Hindu concept of Satya Yuga, virtually every ancient culture preserves memories of a more advanced past. These aren't simple nostalgic yearnings for an imagined better time. They often contain specific technological and architectural details that match the evidence associated with Tartaria. Atmospheric energy systems, advanced building techniques, global transportation networks, and harmonious social structures. The biblical flood narrative finds parallels in over 200 cultures worldwide, each describing a catastrophic deluge that destroyed an advanced civilization. These accounts may preserve memories of the mud flood, event that alternative researchers associate with Tartaria's burial and destruction. Native American oral histories describe encounters with star people or advanced civilizations predating European contact. Many of these accounts mention tall, pale visitors who brought sophisticated knowledge before disappearing, potentially referring to Tartarian presence in North America. The widespread myth of giants building ancient structures may preserve memories of the Tartarian builders. Historical accounts frequently describe the original inhabitants of grand structures as people of unusual height, a detail dismissed as exaggeration but potentially reflecting actual differences in human physiology. Sanskrit texts describe ancient vimanas, flying machines with capabilities resembling modern aircraft. These accounts include technical details regarding propulsion, navigation, and construction that suggest they record observations of actual technology rather than mere imaginative fiction. Ancient Chinese records mention dragon roads, networks allowing rapid travel across vast distances. These descriptions align with alternative researchers' theories about Tartarian transportation systems that may have utilized atmospheric energy or other advanced propulsion methods now forgotten. The persistent myths of ancient high technology appear across seemingly unconnected cultures. References to wireless communication, weather control, advanced medical procedures, and energy systems recur in traditions worldwide, suggesting common observations of an advanced global civilization. These mythic fragments align with physical evidence found worldwide, evidence that conventional archaeology struggles to explain. Out-of-place artifacts, OPAs, present some of the most compelling physical evidence challenging our conventional historical narrative. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a 2,000-year-old shipwreck, reveals astronomical calculation abilities previously thought impossible for its era. This ancient analog computer demonstrates mathematical and engineering knowledge supposedly unavailable until the 18th century. Ancient batteries found in Baghdad, functional despite being over 2,000 years old, suggest electrical knowledge millennia before its supposed discovery. Conventional explanations struggle to account for these devices, which show understanding of principles supposedly unknown until the modern era. Precise megalithic structures worldwide exhibit engineering tolerances and mathematical knowledge supposedly beyond their builders' capabilities. From Puma Punku's precisely cut stones to Baalbek's massive foundation blocks, these constructions challenge conventional historical timelines. Maps like the Piri Reis and Orontius Phineas show geographical knowledge supposedly impossible for their time, including accurate coastlines of Antarctica beneath its ice sheet. These maps suggest preservation of advanced geographical knowledge from an earlier, more sophisticated civilization. Ancient texts describe medical procedures, including brain surgery and prosthetic limbs, that wouldn't be redeveloped until modern times. Archaeological evidence confirms these accounts, with skulls showing signs of successful trepanation and healing, operations requiring sophisticated medical knowledge. Metallurgical anomalies appear worldwide in artifacts exhibiting properties supposedly beyond ancient capabilities. The Delhi iron pillar, corrosion-resistant despite standing in open air for centuries, demonstrates material science knowledge conventional history places millennia later. The historical record contains documented technologies that vanished rather than evolved. Roman concrete, superior to modern versions and able to harden underwater, represents knowledge lost for centuries. Was this independent Roman innovation or preserved Tartarian technology? Ancient acoustic technologies created structures with sound properties that modern engineers struggle to replicate. Chambers that amplify specific frequencies, theaters with perfect acoustics without electronic assistance, and buildings that create infrasound effects suggest sophisticated understanding of wave propagation. The evidence extends to ancient chemistry. Pigments and dyes showing extraordinary durability and vibrancy contradict the narrative of primitive chemical knowledge. Some ancient colorants remain unfaded after thousands of years, while modern equivalents deteriorate within decades. Astronomical alignments in ancient structures worldwide demonstrate mathematical precision and observational astronomy, supposedly beyond their builders' capabilities. These alignments often incorporate knowledge of celestial cycles requiring centuries of accurate observation to discover. The persistence of identical architectural forms across supposedly unconnected cultures raises profound questions. Why do step pyramids appear in Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, and Mesoamerica with similar proportions and alignments? Does this represent independent invention or preserved knowledge from a common source? The widespread distribution of star fort designs presents a similar puzzle. These mathematically complex defensive structures appear across continents with nearly identical geometric principles. Conventional history attributes this to European military innovation spreading globally, but many predate this supposed origin. Ancient linguistic connections provide another category of out-of-place evidence. Linguistic researchers have identified root language patterns connecting seemingly unrelated tongues across continents. Patterns suggesting a common origin or global contact predating conventional historical timelines. Genetic studies reveal their own anomalies. Unexpected DNA connections between populations supposedly isolated from each other challenge conventional migration narratives. These genetic markers suggest global population movements more complex than the standard historical model allows. Geological evidence presents perhaps the most compelling physical anomalies. Structures worldwide show signs of catastrophic mud inundation consistent with the mud flood theory. Buried first floors, streets raised well above original levels, and buildings emerging from hillsides all suggest rapid sedimentation events. This geological evidence extends beyond architecture to landscapes. Terrain features traditionally attributed to glacial activity might instead result from catastrophic mud flows. The timing of these features aligns with the proposed Tartarian cataclysm in the early 19th century. Electrical scarring appears on numerous ancient stone structures, patterns consistent with massive electrical discharges rather than conventional weathering. These markings match those created by lightning strikes or industrial electrical accidents, suggesting technological disasters or weapons deployment. Mining operations frequently uncover anomalous artifacts at impossible depths. Metal objects, complex devices, and manufactured items have been documented in coal seams and rock strata, supposedly millions of years old, findings systematically excluded from conventional archaeological consideration. Oceanic discoveries reveal submerged structures worldwide, not just in areas of known sea level change, but in regions where conventional geology recognizes no recent submergence. These underwater complexes suggest catastrophic flooding events not included in the standard geological timeline. The conventional explanation for these anomalies typically involves either coincidence, misinterpretation, or isolated genius ahead of its time. Yet the global distribution, consistent patterns, and sheer volume of these out-of-place findings suggests a more systematic explanation. The Tartaria theory provides that systematic framework, a global advanced civilization with shared knowledge, sophisticated technology, and worldwide influence. This single explanation accounts for thousands of otherwise puzzling archaeological, architectural, and historical anomalies. Rather than requiring us to believe in hundreds of independent cases of isolated genius or misinterpreted evidence, the alternative timeline suggests these anomalies represent fragments of a coherent advanced civilization, one deliberately erased from our historical record following a catastrophic reset. As we examine these myths and out-of-place artifacts, a pattern emerges. The evidence doesn't appear randomly distributed through history and geography. It clusters around specific time periods and locations associated with the proposed Tartarian civilization and its subsequent erasure. This pattern of evidence challenges not just specific historical facts, but our entire understanding of human development. If even a fraction of these anomalies represent genuine advanced knowledge in the past, our conception of history as linear progress from primitive to advanced requires fundamental revision. Chapter 7: The Hidden Hand Behind History. As we've explored the architectural anomalies, technological contradictions, and out-of-place artifacts challenging our conventional historical narrative, a more profound question emerges. If Tartaria existed as an advanced global civilization, why would knowledge of it be systematically suppressed? Who benefits from historical erasure? The stakes of this question extend far beyond academic curiosity. If our understanding of human history has been deliberately manipulated, it transforms our conception of who we are, what we're capable of, and who controls the narrative that shapes our collective identity and potential. The timing of Tartaria's apparent removal from historical records coincides with profound transformations in global power structures. The early 19th century saw the dissolution of older imperial systems, the rise of nation-states, and the emergence of industrial capitalism as the dominant economic paradigm. This period also witnessed the establishment of centralized banking systems, standardized education, and mass media capable of shaping public consciousness on unprecedented scales. These developments created both the motive and the means for comprehensive historical revision. The motive becomes clear when we examine what Tartarian civilization apparently represented: a society potentially operating on principles fundamentally different from those that would come to dominate the modern world. The evidence suggests a civilization utilizing different energy systems, economic structures, and governance models. Tartarian architecture integrated atmospheric energy collection systems similar to those later proposed by Nikola Tesla, technology that would have provided abundant, decentralized power without reliance on fossil fuels or centralized utilities. The economic implications of such energy independence are profound. The architectural record suggests buildings designed to harmonize with natural forces rather than dominate them, structures utilizing sacred geometry, resonant frequencies, and biocompatible materials that enhanced human well-being. These design principles directly contradict the industrial architectural paradigm that replaced them. Historical accounts describe Tartarian governance as operating on principles different from the nation-state model that would dominate the post-reset world. References to more decentralized authority structures, local autonomy within universal principles, and leadership based on wisdom rather than military power appear in surviving documents. The suppression of Tartaria may represent the greatest privatization of knowledge and resources in human history. The systematic transfer of advanced technology, architectural wisdom, and cultural heritage from common ownership into the hands of a small group who would reshape civilization to their benefit. This perspective transforms our understanding of the Industrial Revolution itself. Rather than representing unprecedented progress, it may actually document the controlled release of recovered Tartarian knowledge, technologies reintroduced in forms that could be owned, commodified, and centrally controlled. The patent system established during this period provided the legal framework for this privatization. Technologies potentially in common use throughout Tartaria could now be invented, claimed as private intellectual property, and monetized by individuals and corporations connected to the new power structure. The stakes of this revelation extend to our understanding of human potential itself. If Tartaria achieved advanced technology, harmonious social structures, and sophisticated knowledge systems, then the limitations we accept as inherent to human society may actually be artificially imposed constraints. Our conception of progress as requiring environmental destruction, social inequality, and centralized control might be revealed as propaganda rather than necessity. The architectural and technological evidence suggests Tartaria achieved advancement without these supposedly inevitable compromises. The implications for modern society are transformative. Energy technology seemingly available to Tartaria would upend our current economic system, eliminating dependency on fossil fuels and the geopolitical conflicts they generate. The architectural knowledge alone would revolutionize our built environment. Consider what this means for our relationship with authority. If our entire historical narrative has been manipulated, what other established facts might be controlling fictions designed to limit human potential and maintain systems of power that benefit few at the expense of many? The educational system itself becomes suspect in this light. Established in its modern form during the very period of Tartaria's erasure, standardized education has consistently reinforced the revised historical narrative while marginalizing alternative perspectives as fringe conspiracy theories. The control mechanisms extend beyond formal education. The Smithsonian Institution, established in 1846, quickly became the authority determining which archaeological findings entered the official record. Thousands of anomalous artifacts that contradicted the established timeline disappeared into its storage facilities. Academic and professional credentialing systems created during this period ensured that challenges to the revised history would be career-ending. The establishment of respectable science and history as defined by newly created institutions effectively marginalized alternative researchers regardless of their evidence. The media systems developed during the 19th century and refined in the 20th created unprecedented capacity for narrative control. The same interests that benefited from Tartaria's erasure gained ownership of newspapers, publishing houses, and later radio, television, and film studios. This control extends to the physical evidence itself. The strategic destruction of archives through apparently accidental fires, the reorganization of library classification systems, and the selective preservation of historical documents all serve to eliminate contradictory evidence while establishing the revised narrative. The Great Fires that destroyed Chicago, San Francisco, Baltimore, and other cities conveniently eliminated original land records, newspaper archives, and municipal documentation that might have preserved evidence of pre-existing Tartarian occupation. The timing of these accidental destructions is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Urban renewal projects throughout the 20th century continued this process, demolishing older structures that contained architectural evidence contradicting the official timeline. Historic preservation efforts, while seemingly protective, often involved renovations that removed anomalous features from surviving buildings. Even archaeology became a mechanism for evidence suppression. Sites contradicting the established chronology frequently faced excavation restrictions, while findings that reinforced the conventional narrative received abundant funding and attention. This selection bias created a self-reinforcing historical paradigm. The systematic nature of these mechanisms suggests coordinated action rather than coincidence, a deliberate program of historical revision implemented across multiple domains simultaneously. The question becomes not whether our history has been manipulated, but how extensively and by whom. The consequences of this manipulation extend far beyond abstract historical interest. Our beliefs about human potential, the inevitable structure of society, and the limits of technology all derive from our understanding of the past. By controlling this understanding, those in power control our conception of what's possible. If we believe human civilization has followed a linear progression from primitive to advanced, we accept current limitations as the natural state of development. If instead we recognize that advanced knowledge has been suppressed and forgotten, we must question why these technologies remain unavailable. The energy question alone transforms global geopolitics. If atmospheric energy technologies demonstrated by Tesla were developed from recovered Tartarian knowledge, our entire petroleum-based economy, and the conflicts, environmental destruction, and power structures it generates, represents an unnecessary detour. The architectural knowledge evident in Tartarian structures would revolutionize our built environment. Buildings that naturally regulate temperature, collect clean energy, and enhance human well-being through sacred geometrical proportions would transform our relationship with the natural world. The medical knowledge suggested in ancient texts, procedures, and treatments lost for centuries before being rediscovered, raises disturbing questions about unnecessary suffering perpetuated through knowledge suppression. How many treatments remain hidden while profitable, but inferior alternatives dominate? Even our understanding of human consciousness may be artificially limited. Historical accounts describe technologies and practices for consciousness expansion, intuitive knowledge acquisition, and non-local awareness that contradict the materialist paradigm established during the period of Tartaria's erasure. The possibility emerges that human civilization isn't approaching unprecedented heights of achievement, but rather still recovering from a catastrophic loss of knowledge, one potentially engineered to facilitate the greatest transfer of power and resources in recorded history. This perspective transforms how we interpret current technological developments. Our innovations like wireless power transmission, free energy research, and consciousness technologies genuine breakthroughs, or rediscoveries of knowledge available to our ancestors before the historical reset. The suppression continues in the present day. Researchers exploring alternative historical narratives face systematic credibility attacks regardless of their evidence. Academic institutions maintain rigid boundaries around acceptable historical inquiry, while media systems marginalize challenges to the conventional timeline. Patent offices continue to suppress technologies that threaten established industry dominance, particularly in energy production. Thousands of patents remain classified under national security provisions, many relating to energy generation systems with suspicious similarities to those visible in Tartarian architectural remains. The archaeological record remains tightly controlled. Access to potentially revelatory sites faces bureaucratic obstacles, while mainstream archaeological publications refuse to consider findings that contradict established chronologies. This institutional resistance perpetuates the historical amnesia imposed during the 19th century. Yet despite these ongoing suppression mechanisms, the evidence continues to accumulate. The internet has created unprecedented opportunities for independent researchers to share findings, connect disparate evidence, and collectively reconstruct aspects of our hidden history outside institutional control. High-resolution satellite imagery reveals city layouts, architectural alignments, and geographical patterns invisible to previous generations. Digital enhancement of historical photographs uncovers details overlooked in earlier analyses. Advanced materials testing identifies anomalous properties in ancient artifacts. The alternative research community continues to grow, driven by both the compelling evidence and the inadequacy of conventional explanations for the architectural and technological anomalies we've examined. The questions raised cannot be dismissed as mere conspiracy theories when the physical evidence stands in plain sight. As this evidence accumulates, we approach a potential tipping point, a moment when the conventional historical narrative becomes unsustainable against the weight of contradictory physical evidence. The implications of this paradigm shift extend far beyond academic history into the foundations of modern society. If Tartaria existed as the evidence suggests, a global, advanced civilization utilizing free energy, harmonic architecture, and more enlightened social structures, then our current civilization represents not the pinnacle of human achievement, but a deliberately limited shadow of what we once created and could create again. The ultimate stakes of the Tartaria question transcend historical curiosity. They challenge us to reconsider everything we've been taught about human potential, technological possibilities, and the inevitable structure of society. They invite us to recover not just knowledge, but wisdom that could transform our world. As we continue our exploration, we move beyond merely documenting anomalies to reconstructing what was lost and asking the most important question of all: if an advanced global civilization was indeed erased from our collective memory, how do we ensure that the knowledge and wisdom it represented isn't lost forever? Chapter 8: The Great Reset Debate. As we've examined the evidence for Tartaria's existence and subsequent erasure, we must now consider the competing theories that attempt to explain these same architectural anomalies, technological contradictions, and historical gaps. Three primary explanations have emerged, each with its own supporting evidence and logical framework. The first and most conventional explanation is the misinterpreted evidence theory. This perspective argues that alternative researchers are correctly identifying real anomalies, but drawing incorrect conclusions. The grand architecture, technological mysteries, and historical contradictions have conventional explanations that don't require a hidden civilization. Proponents of this view point out that architectural styles spread through normal cultural diffusion. Neoclassical, Baroque, and Renaissance revival movements deliberately copied earlier forms, creating stylistic consistency across continents. The shared features represent artistic influence rather than evidence of a single global civilization. The rapid construction of ornate buildings during the Gilded Age reflected genuine economic expansion, innovative construction techniques, and the availability of mass-produced architectural elements. Decorative features previously requiring master craftsmen could now be manufactured in factories and shipped to construction sites. The buried first floors and raised street levels resulted from practical urban development decisions. Cities like Seattle and Chicago deliberately raised street levels to address flooding, improve drainage, and accommodate sewage systems. What appears to be evidence of catastrophic burial was actually intentional engineering. Nighttime illumination in historical photographs came from gas lighting, arc lamps, and early electrical systems, not mysterious Tartarian technology. The apparent absence of power generation facilities in these images simply reflects their location outside the photographic frame or in unidentified buildings. The architectural and technological similarities across continents resulted from the unprecedented global communication and transportation networks of the 19th century. Ideas, designs, and innovations spread rapidly through professional journals, world's fairs, and international commerce. This conventional explanation has the advantage of not requiring vast conspiracies or catastrophic events absent from the historical record. It accommodates the observed anomalies within the established historical framework, albeit sometimes through complex or multiple explanations for related phenomena. The second major competing theory is the natural catastrophe and recovery model. This perspective accepts that a major civilization reset occurred but attributes it to natural rather than engineered causes. The evidence for buried structures, technological regression, and historical revision remains valid but with different causation. According to this theory, a series of natural cataclysms in the early 19th century, perhaps triggered by volcanic eruptions like the 1815 Tambora event that caused the year without a summer, created massive atmospheric disturbances, floods, and mud inundations that buried existing cities worldwide. The resulting climate disruption, agricultural failure, and infrastructure damage created a genuine dark age. Populations crashed, knowledge was lost, and survivors reoccupied partially buried structures without fully understanding their original functions or the technologies they incorporated. The subsequent historical revision happened organically rather than conspiratorially. Survivors reconstructed history based on limited information, creating narratives that made sense of the partially buried world they inhabited. Over generations, these reconstructed histories became accepted as fact. This theory explains the architectural and technological anomalies without requiring a deliberate campaign of historical suppression. It accommodates the physical evidence of buried structures, lost technologies, and historical discontinuities while avoiding claims of orchestrated manipulation. The third and most radical competing explanation is the full civilization reset theory. This perspective maintains that Tartaria was indeed an advanced global civilization, but disagrees about how and why it disappeared. Rather than mud floods or natural disasters alone, it proposes a deliberate reset of civilization. According to this theory, a conflict occurred between different factions of the global Tartarian civilization, perhaps between those advocating free energy systems and those seeking centralized control of resources. The winning faction implemented a comprehensive reset of both infrastructure and human consciousness. This reset employed advanced technologies to create targeted cataclysmic events, memory manipulation, and the strategic destruction of evidence. The winners rewrote history not just in books, but potentially in human consciousness itself, using technologies suggested in ancient texts describing forgetting spells or mass consciousness alterations. The subsequent control system established during the 19th century, centralized education, banking, media, and governance, represents the infrastructure of this consciousness management operation. The historical revision wasn't merely physical, but extended to the suppression of human cognitive and spiritual capabilities. This theory accommodates evidence of both natural catastrophes and deliberate suppression. It explains the comprehensive nature of the historical revision, the global consistency of architectural burial, and the curious psychological resistance many people experience when questioning the conventional historical narrative. Each of these competing theories addresses the same evidence, but reaches dramatically different conclusions about causation, intent, and implications. The conventional explanation minimizes mystery but requires numerous separate explanations for related phenomena. The natural catastrophe theory acknowledges a reset, but attributes it to nature rather than intention. The civilization reset theory offers the most comprehensive explanation but requires accepting the most radical departure from conventional history. It suggests not merely that we've misunderstood our past, but that this misunderstanding was deliberately engineered as part of a comprehensive consciousness control operation. When evaluating these competing theories, we must consider not just the physical evidence, but the psychological and sociological implications. The conventional explanation aligns with our existing worldview, but often requires complex or strained interpretations of straightforward evidence. The natural catastrophe theory acknowledges the physical evidence more directly, but still struggles to explain the systematic nature of historical revision across multiple domains simultaneously. Natural disasters might explain buried buildings, but not the coordinated rewriting of historical narratives worldwide. The civilization reset theory explains both the physical evidence and the systematic nature of the historical revision, but requires accepting the existence of technologies and capabilities beyond what conventional history attributes to the 19th century. Ultimately, these competing theories may not be entirely mutually exclusive. Elements of each may contribute to the full explanation. Natural catastrophes may have occurred but been exploited opportunistically to implement a planned reset. Some historical revision may be organic while other aspects were deliberate. What remains consistent across all three interpretations is the acknowledgement that our historical understanding contains significant gaps. Whether through misinterpretation, natural catastrophe, or deliberate reset, the architectural and technological evidence suggests a past different from what we've been taught. As we evaluate these competing theories, we must remain open to new evidence while applying critical thinking to all claims, whether conventional or alternative. The architectural anomalies stand regardless of our interpretation. The technological contradictions persist irrespective of our explanation for them. Perhaps the most significant implication is not which theory proves correct, but what each reveals about our relationship with history itself. All three perspectives acknowledge that our understanding of the past remains incomplete. All three recognize that the physical evidence sometimes contradicts the textbook narratives. This recognition, that history itself is contested ground rather than settled fact, may be the most valuable insight to emerge from our exploration of Tartaria. Whatever explanation we accept for the architectural and technological anomalies, the question marks they place beside our historical certainty remain valid. Chapter 9. When Science Catches Up with Myth. As our investigation into Tartaria has progressed, a curious phenomenon has emerged. Scientific discoveries in recent decades have begun validating aspects of the alternative historical narrative that were previously dismissed as speculation or pseudoscience. The gap between conventional history and alternative interpretations is narrowing. Consider the revolution in our understanding of ancient engineering capabilities. For generations, mainstream archaeology insisted that megalithic structures were built using primitive tools and massive human labor forces. Alternative researchers suggesting advanced technologies were ridiculed as fantasists. Yet modern engineering analysis now confirms that many ancient structures could not have been built using the methods historically attributed to their creators. The precision cutting of massive stone blocks, their transportation across vast distances, and their placement with millimeter accuracy required technologies beyond conventional historical attribution. The astronomical knowledge embedded in ancient architecture presents similar validation. Structures previously believed to incorporate celestial alignments by coincidence or simple observation are now recognized as demonstrating mathematical and astronomical understanding requiring centuries of systematic observation and calculation. Ancient maps once dismissed as inaccurate or imaginative are now acknowledged as containing geographical knowledge supposedly unavailable to their creators. The accurate representation of Antarctica's coastline beneath its ice sheet, visible in maps created centuries before Antarctica's official discovery, suggests preserved knowledge from an earlier, sophisticated civilization. Archaeological dating itself has undergone significant revision. New technologies like optically stimulated luminescence dating have frequently returned dates much older than previously established chronologies allowed. Many sites have been pushed back thousands of years, validating alternative timelines previously rejected as impossibly ancient. Genetic studies have revealed population movements and connections that contradict conventional historical narratives. DNA analysis shows contact between populations supposedly isolated from each other, suggesting global travel and cultural exchange far earlier than officially recognized. The capabilities of ancient concrete and metallurgy, long considered inferior to modern versions, have been re-evaluated. Roman concrete now proves superior to modern formulations in durability and environmental resistance. Ancient steel demonstrates material properties that modern metallurgists struggle to replicate. Even in medicine, ancient knowledge dismissed as superstition increasingly proves scientifically valid. Compounds used in traditional pharmacology demonstrate efficacy through mechanisms only recently understood by modern science. Surgical techniques described in ancient texts show sophisticated understanding of human anatomy. These scientific validations create a profound paradox. If our ancestors possessed knowledge and capabilities beyond what conventional history attributes to them, how was this knowledge acquired? And if it was subsequently lost, what mechanisms caused such significant technological and scientific regression? The Tartaria theory provides one coherent explanation for this paradox. A global advanced civilization possessing sophisticated knowledge subsequently lost in a catastrophic reset would explain both the evidence of advanced ancient capabilities and their mysterious disappearance from human knowledge. A second paradox emerges from architectural analysis. When modern engineers attempt to replicate historical construction techniques, they frequently discover that the original methods remain superior to contemporary approaches. This suggests not linear progress, but lost knowledge gradually being rediscovered. Buildings constructed in the supposed Tartarian era demonstrate superior acoustic properties, natural temperature regulation, and resilience compared to modern structures. Despite our advanced computer modeling and materials science, these buildings achieve effects through seemingly simple means that we struggle to replicate. The energy paradox presents perhaps the most significant contradiction. If atmospheric electricity collection was widespread in the 19th century, as photographic and architectural evidence suggests, why did society subsequently adopt more primitive, inefficient, and environmentally damaging energy systems? Nikola Tesla's work on wireless energy transmission represents a critical connection point. His demonstrations prove the viability of extracting usable electricity from the atmosphere, technology visually similar to the devices appearing atop buildings in 19th century photographs. Tesla's famous conflict with Edison and Morgan, resulting in the suppression of his wireless energy patents, mirrors the larger pattern we've identified in Tartarian history. Advanced, decentralized technology was systematically replaced with systems offering greater potential for centralized control and profit. The paradoxes extend to social organization. Conventional history presents human social evolution as progressing from primitive to advanced structures. Yet archaeological and anthropological evidence increasingly reveals sophisticated social systems in ancient societies, suggesting regression rather than linear advancement. These scientific revelations create profound implications for our understanding of human development. Rather than a steady march of progress from primitive to advanced, the evidence increasingly suggests a more complex pattern of advancement, collapse, and recovery potentially repeated multiple times throughout human history. This cyclical view aligns with ancient wisdom traditions worldwide. From the Vedic Yugas to Hesiod's Ages of Man, traditional knowledge systems consistently describe cycles of advancement and decline rather than linear progress. Modern scientific discoveries increasingly validate these ancient perspectives. The psychological paradox may be most revealing. Why does mainstream academia resist evidence challenging conventional historical narratives so intensely? The emotional reactions often seem disproportionate to the claims, suggesting deeper psychological mechanisms beyond normal scientific skepticism. If our understanding of history has indeed been deliberately manipulated, we would expect to find psychological defense mechanisms embedded within education and media systems, triggers that create immediate resistance to information challenging the established narrative regardless of supporting evidence. The internet age has created an unprecedented ability to research, connect disparate evidence, and share findings outside institutional control. This technological development may represent a critical factor in the resurgence of alternative historical narratives previously suppressed through control of information channels. Advanced imaging technologies now reveal details in historical photographs previously invisible to researchers. Satellite mapping identifies architectural alignments and geographical patterns across continents. Ground-penetrating radar discovers buried structures without destructive excavation. These tools provide evidence inaccessible to earlier generations. The digital preservation and distribution of historical documents circumvent traditional gatekeeping mechanisms. Texts, photographs, and maps previously accessible only through institutional archives now reach global audiences, allowing collective analysis and interpretation outside academic control. Even conventional archaeological discoveries increasingly support aspects of the alternative timeline. Göbekli Tepe, dated to 10,000 BCE, demonstrates advanced architectural and astronomical knowledge millennia before such capabilities should have existed according to conventional historical models. The underwater archaeological sites discovered worldwide present similar challenges to established chronology. Extensive built environments now submerged off coastlines suggest advanced civilizations existing during periods when conventional history claims humans lived as primitive hunter-gatherers. These scientific discoveries create a new opportunity for reconciliation between conventional and alternative historical perspectives. As empirical evidence increasingly validates aspects of the alternative timeline, The gap between official history and suppressed narratives narrows. This convergence suggests the possibility of a new historical synthesis, one acknowledging both the validity of rigorous evidence-based methodology and the reality that significant aspects of human history have been misinterpreted, overlooked, or deliberately obscured. Such a synthesis would recognize that human civilization has followed a more complex trajectory than our textbooks suggest. It would acknowledge periods of advanced development followed by collapse and regression. It would accept that knowledge can be lost as well as gained across generations. Most importantly, this emerging scientific perspective would recognize that our understanding of human potential itself may have been artificially constrained. If our ancestors achieved technological and social development beyond what we've been taught, our conception of what's possible requires expansion. The scientific validation of previously rejected historical perspectives creates profound implications for our future. Technologies dismissed as impossible within the conventional timeline, free energy systems, advanced acoustic engineering, non-destructive construction methods, may represent recoverable knowledge rather than futuristic speculation. As we integrate these scientific discoveries with the architectural and documentary evidence examined throughout this investigation, a more coherent picture emerges, one in which Tartaria represents not merely a geographical territory, but a chapter of human achievement deliberately removed from our collective memory. Chapter 10. The Veil Between Worlds. We began this journey with a simple yet profound question. What if Tartaria was real? What if an advanced civilization existed, spanning continents, employing technologies we're only now rediscovering, before being systematically erased from historical records? After examining the evidence, what conclusions can we reach? The revelation emerges not as a single dramatic disclosure, but through the accumulation of evidence across multiple domains. The architectural anomalies, technological contradictions, historical discontinuities, and scientific validations collectively paint a picture dramatically different from our conventional understanding of human history. Tartaria was real, but not necessarily in the exact form proposed by the most enthusiastic alternative researchers. The evidence suggests not a single monolithic empire, but rather a global civilization operating on shared principles, technologies, and knowledge systems that transcended the political boundaries we now impose on history. The architectural record provides the most tangible evidence. The worldwide distribution of buildings sharing specific design elements, construction techniques, and technological features cannot be adequately explained through conventional diffusion theories. These structures represent the physical remnants of a more unified global culture. The technological evidence is equally compelling. Historical photographs, surviving devices, and architectural features demonstrate knowledge of atmospheric electricity, wireless transmission, acoustic engineering, and other advanced technologies supposedly unavailable until much later periods. This technological sophistication transcended regional boundaries. The historical record, despite deliberate revision, preserves traces of this global civilization. Maps, encyclopedia entries, travel accounts, and governmental records all document aspects of Tartarian culture, territory, and influence before these references were systematically reduced and eliminated during the 19th century. What emerged from our investigation isn't merely evidence that conventional history is incomplete, though it certainly is. The deeper revelation is that human civilization appears to follow cyclical rather than linear development, with periods of advancement, catastrophe, regression, and recovery repeating throughout our longer history. Tartaria represents the most recent of these advanced cycles, a global civilization reaching its peak in the 1700s before experiencing catastrophic reset in the early 19th century. The architecture we've examined represents the surviving physical evidence of this civilization, while the historical revision documents the subsequent narrative reconstruction. The reset itself combined natural and engineered elements. Evidence suggests a major atmospheric disturbance, potentially triggered by volcanic eruptions or cosmic events, that created massive flooding and mud inundation. But the subsequent historical revision shows clear signs of deliberate orchestration rather than organic development. The most significant revelation concerns the nature of this orchestration. The transformation wasn't merely architectural or technological, but extended to human consciousness itself. The civilization reset included the implementation of belief systems, educational structures, and psychological triggers designed to prevent recognition of the previous reality. This explains the curious psychological resistance many experience when confronting evidence contradicting the conventional historical narrative. The resistance isn't merely academic defensiveness, but reflects embedded psychological barriers, what might be called reality filters, installed during the civilization reset process. These consciousness control mechanisms represent the most sophisticated aspect of the reset technology. Through coordinated implementation of educational systems, religious modifications, and early mass media, those orchestrating the reset installed a comprehensive worldview that rendered the previous civilization effectively invisible to its descendants. The true nature of Tartaria becomes clear through this lens. It wasn't merely an advanced civilization technologically, though it certainly was that. Its more fundamental advancement lay in its integration of technological and consciousness technologies within a unified cosmological framework. The architectural evidence supports this conclusion. The buildings we've examined weren't merely aesthetic achievements, but functional technologies integrating sacred geometry, acoustic properties, atmospheric energy collection, and consciousness-enhancing design elements within unified structures serving multiple purposes simultaneously. This integration explains why these structures were targeted for burial, repurposing, and destruction during the reset. They weren't merely buildings, but technologies. Devices integrating physical and consciousness functions in ways threatening to the more materialistic, centralized, and hierarchical system being implemented. The post-reset civilization, our modern world, systematically separated domains that Tartaria had integrated. Science was divorced from spirituality, technology from consciousness, governance from natural principles. This fragmentation facilitated specialized progress in material technologies while suppressing integrated advancement. The energy systems transition epitomizes this transformation. Tartaria appears to have utilized atmospheric electricity, abundant, decentralized, and freely available. The post-reset system deliberately replaced this with combustion technologies requiring physical fuel sources that could be owned, controlled, and monetized. This pattern of replacing decentralized systems with centralized alternatives appears consistently across domains during the post-reset period. Banking, education, media, governance, and energy all transformed from distributed to hierarchical structures, facilitating unprecedented concentration of power in institutional forms. The revelation transcends mere historical curiosity. If our civilization developed through deliberate reset rather than organic evolution, it transforms our understanding of both our past and our potential future. The limitations we accept as inevitable may actually be artificially imposed constraints serving specific interests. This perspective resolves the paradox of technological development that has puzzled alternative researchers. Why would an advanced civilization apparently regress technologically? The answer emerges clearly. What appears as regression actually represents a deliberate transition from integrated to fragmented technological paradigms. Material technology continued advancing after the reset, indeed, accelerated in many domains. But consciousness technology, integrated systems, and technologies facilitating human autonomy were systematically suppressed. The reset wasn't a complete technological regression, but a selective redirection of development. The ultimate revelation concerns not just what was lost, but what remains recoverable. The architectural evidence, technological fragments, and surviving documents provide pathways for rediscovering Tartarian knowledge. The reset was comprehensive but not complete. The evidence remained hidden in plain sight. This explains the intensifying efforts to destroy remaining architectural evidence through urban renewal, controlled demolition, and strategic fires. It explains the accelerating suppression of alternative historical narratives as digital technologies facilitate their spread beyond institutional control. The reset continues as an active process, yet the evidence persists and proliferates despite these efforts. The internet age creates unprecedented opportunities for collective research, documentation sharing, and hypothesis testing outside institutional frameworks. The very technologies developed by the post-reset civilization now facilitate rediscovery of what it sought to suppress. The great reveal isn't that Tartaria existed as a specific empire with defined boundaries. The evidence suggests something both simpler and more profound. Human civilization has repeatedly achieved levels of advancement beyond what our conventional history acknowledges, followed by reset events both natural and engineered. Tartaria represents the most recent and best documented of these advanced cycles, recent enough that its physical evidence remains abundant despite systematic efforts at removal, and its documentation survives despite deliberate historical revision. It provides our clearest window into the cyclical nature of human civilization. The implications transform our understanding of both past and future. If previous human civilizations achieved integrated technological and consciousness development beyond our current level, our potential exceeds the limitations we've been taught to accept. The constraints defining our current civilization may be artificial rather than inevitable. This revelation doesn't require belief in supernatural forces or extraterrestrial intervention. The evidence suggests advanced but entirely human civilizations developing through longer historical cycles than our conventional chronology acknowledges. The mystery lies not in otherworldly origins, but in our own suppressed human potential. As we conclude this investigation, the final revelation may be the most significant. The veil between worlds, between our current civilization and the Tartarian world that preceded it, is thinning. The evidence has reached critical mass. The alternative narrative has achieved global distribution, and the reset programming is losing its effectiveness. We stand at a potential inflection point, a moment when recovered knowledge, combined with modern technological capabilities, creates the possibility of integration that transcends both the lost Tartarian world and our current fragmented civilization. The cycle of advancement and reset may itself be transcended. This possibility represents both the greatest hope and the greatest threat perceived by those maintaining the current system. The recovery of integrated knowledge, particularly concerning energy, consciousness technologies, and decentralized governance, would fundamentally transform power relationships established during the reset. The ultimate revelation isn't about the past at all, but about the future we might create by integrating rediscovered Tartarian knowledge with contemporary technological capabilities. We need not merely recreate a lost world, but might transcend both past and present limitations through conscious integration. As our exploration of the Tartaria mystery concludes, we return to where we began, standing before those magnificent buildings that first sparked our curiosity. The grand domes, the intricate stonework, the impossible construction methods. They stand as silent witnesses, their very existence challenging the historical narrative we've been taught. These structures aren't merely architectural achievements, but memory devices, technologies designed to preserve knowledge beyond written records that could be destroyed or revised. The proportions, alignments, and technical features encode information meant to survive the very type of historical reset they ultimately experienced. In this light, the passionate debate surrounding Tartaria transcends academic disagreement about historical facts. It represents a contested awakening, some recognizing the encoded messages in our architectural heritage, while others remain within the carefully constructed historical narrative established during the reset. This awakening continues regardless of institutional resistance. Each person who looks at a grand old building and wonders about its true origins, each researcher documenting architectural anomalies, each question raised about historical contradictions contributes to the collective recovery of our suppressed heritage. Whether you conclude that Tartaria existed exactly as alternative researchers suggest or find the conventional explanations more persuasive, the questions raised throughout our exploration remain valid. The architectural anomalies still stand. The technological contradictions persist. The historical discontinuities demand explanation. Perhaps the most valuable outcome isn't a specific conclusion about Tartaria, but a more questioning relationship with history itself. Recognition that our understanding of the past remains incomplete, that established narratives serve specific interests, and that the physical evidence sometimes contradicts the textbook version. The buildings will continue standing as silent witnesses, their stones holding memories beyond written records. They wait patiently for humanity to rediscover the knowledge they encode, not merely about construction techniques or energy systems, but about integrated ways of being that transcend our current fragmented existence. As you encounter these structures in your daily life or through continued research, remember that you're not merely observing architecture, but engaging with a technology of memory, one designed to communicate across the very type of civilization reset it ultimately experienced. The message remains accessible to those willing to see. If you found this exploration valuable, consider subscribing to our channel for future investigations into the mysteries hiding in plain sight. The buildings stand ready. The evidence awaits. And the greater human story, one of cycles, resets, and potential beyond our current limitations, continues unfolding through our collective rediscovery.